In comes Dr. S. Jaishankar to school Trudeau.
Nor must we countenance that political convenience determines responses to terrorism, extremism, and violence.
India aggressively exposes Canada. Crackdown begins. Canada feels the heat. Has India put Trudeau on the mat? That's our top focus on India First.
So it's day 8 of that bizarre claim of the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau talking of credible allegations of a possible link of agents of India and the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada. No proof given. No proof given to India even today. In fact, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar in the United States said, if there is something specific, something relevant, show it to India. But as opposition leader in Canada, Pierre Poilievre asks, where is Justin Trudeau? Under what rock is Justin Trudeau hiding? And no response. I'm Gaurav Sawant. India puts Trudeau on the mat. What next for Canada? We debate. But first, as always, the headlines. Horrific video from Ujjain in Madhya Pradesh stuns the country. 12-year-old walks semi-naked and bleeding, begging for help. She's sadly shooed away. Child rights panel sends a notice to the Madhya Pradesh police. Trouble mounts for Arvind Kejriwal. CBI orders a preliminary inquiry into Delhi Chief Minister's house renovation. Aam Aadmi Party says this is the BJP trying to destroy Arvind Kejriwal. Prime Minister Narendra Modi hits out at former UPA government for stalling development in Gujarat, claims investors were threatened by former union ministers in the UPA government. Gold rush for India at Asian Games continues. India's Manu Bhakar, Isa Singh and Rhythm Sangwan win gold in women's 25-meter pistol team event. This is the 5th gold for India. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar made it very clear it's not India's policy to kill terrorists on foreign soil. He also exposed Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying, if you have something specific, if there is something relevant, that evidence must be shown to India and New Delhi will look at it. Speaking in the United States, he also exposed Canada's double speak on terrorism. Despite India repeatedly giving Canada information and dossiers and virtually badgering Canada, no action was taken against terrorists on Canadian soil. Terrorists, extremists and gangsters. We bring you our top story.
You also have to appreciate, Ken, that in the last few years, Canada actually has seen a lot of organized crime, relating to, the secessionist forces, organized crime, violence, extremism.
India calls a spade a spade. Canada providing a safe haven for some of India's most wanted individuals. This includes gangsters and terrorists.
They're all very, very deeply mixed up. So, in fact, we have been, talking about specifics and information. We have actually been badgering the Canadians. We have given them a lot of information about organized crime leadership, which operates out of Canada. There are a large number of extradition requests. There are terrorist leaders who have been identified.
India asserts its stance firmly. In the midst of an escalating diplomatic dispute with Canada, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has forthrightly expressed India's views at the United Nations and outside in New York. Selective actions in the name of preserving territorial integrity and internal affairs not acceptable.
Nor must we countenance that political convenience determines responses to terrorism, extremism, and violence. Similarly, respect for territorial integrity and non-interference in internal affairs cannot be exercises in cherry-picking. When reality departs from the rhetoric, we must have the courage to call it out.
President, I'm very honored.
Canada has pointed fingers at India over the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, designated as terrorist by India.
We cannot bend the rules of state-to-state relations for political expediency, because we've seen and continue to see the extent to which democracies are under threat through various means of foreign interference.
India has made it abundantly clear that it rejects any form of diplomatic dominance in shaping international rules.
For all the talk, it is still a few nations who shape the agenda and seek to define the norms. This cannot go on indefinitely, nor will it go unchallenged. A fair, equitable, and democratic order will surely emerge once we all put our minds to it. And for a start, that means ensuring that rule makers do not subjugate rule takers. After all, rules will work only when they apply equally to all.
However, India, while rejecting Canadian allegations, remains open to examining the Nijjar case if Canada can provide substantial evidence.
One, we told the Canadians that this is not the government of India's policy. Two, we told the Canadians saying that, look, if you have something specific, if you have something relevant, let us know. We are open to looking at it. So, but to understand the context of it, in a way, because the picture is not complete without the context in a way.
India rejects any attempts at diplomatic manipulations while remaining open to dialogue and cooperation. Bureau Report, India Today.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar virtually schooled Justin Trudeau with facts. But as opposition leader in Canada, Pierre Poilievre asked, which rock has Justin Trudeau crawled under? Where is Justin Trudeau after making those baseless allegations against India? And what next for India-Canada ties? Joining me on India First is Terry Mills. He's a senior Canadian journalist and author of Blood for Blood, 50 years of the global Khalistan project. Also with me is Yashovardhan Azad, former Special Director of India's Intelligence Bureau. And Terry Milski, if I may ask you first, sir, Dr. Jaishankar in the United States categorically said if Canada has something specific, something relevant, let India know. India is open to looking at it. Canada, it seems, sir, has given no evidence to India to back Justin Trudeau's claims of credible allegations of a potential link.
Yes, and I know that's the Indian story. However, I'm not sure whether I believe it. Somebody isn't telling the truth here, and it may be the Canadians. Because the Canadians have been saying for some days now that, well, wait a minute, we went to, at the official level, we went to the Indians and told them, look, this is what we got. It suggests that one of your guys might have been involved in this murder. Work with us to resolve this case. And they say, the Canadians say, that at no stage did those Indian officials that they were dealing with before the G20, before the Trudeau-Modi meeting, that none of the officials denied the allegations that were involved here. Now the Indians have been saying for the past couple of days, have they not, that this isn't true, that we never have received any specifics. Well, somebody's not telling the truth. To me, it seems inconceivable that Trudeau and Modi could have had a meeting, as they did, a short and frosty meeting to be sure, at the G20 in New Delhi, and that Trudeau says that he brought this matter up to Mr. Modi in no uncertain terms, in his words, and that Modi sat there like a potted plant and asked no questions. I mean, that's inconceivable. It's also inconceivable, it seems to me, that Mr. Modi would have rejected the Canadian allegations if he did not know what they were. So we can be pretty sure, I think, that Mr. Modi does know what they were. He would not be satisfied if he had been rebuffed. He wouldn't have accepted that. Well, you've got to tell me what your evidence is.
Yes.
I mean, of course he would have asked that. So we're in a situation where this is tit for tat denials. You didn't tell us. Oh, yes, we did. Well, it doesn't really help the rest of us. It doesn't change the fact that Indians rightly believe it's the obligation is on Trudeau to reveal his cards, show the evidence. And for Canadians too, both Canadians and Indians are being, I believe, shortchanged by their politicians, not telling us what's going on here.
Oh,
we want to know what the evidence is.
Absolutely.
Indians
we deserve
and
to
Canadians.
know. We deserve to know. And Yashovardhan Azad, India insists no evidence shared so far. So even if there are intelligence inputs that was shared between Five Eyes partners, is that sufficient for a prime minister of a country like Canada to stand up in parliament and directly blame India? Or has Justin Trudeau's desperate gamble backfired? He needs to put that evidence out in public domain.
See, there are two or three things which are very important to be pointed out here, Gaurav. First is that if you have an investigation of a murder, so as a police officer, the first thing I would say is that there should be credible evidence as far as the murder is concerned and the arrests of those two masked men that we are talking about. It's been 3.5 months now. There was a getaway car. There is somebody who was ready to take them away. And there were these two masked men. There have been no arrests so far. There have been no statement recorded of anybody. So obviously what the Prime Minister is referring to is some kind of intelligence inputs, which he has got sharing of intelligence also from somebody. Now, if that in itself might be an allegation, but it has to be established by some facts. So even if the meeting took place in G20 between the Prime Minister and the Canadian Prime Minister, obviously if there was a denial from this side. So in the absence of any credible evidence you're confronted with, what do you reply? So I think the Foreign Minister said it very rightly, that we are still waiting for any solid evidence which we can furnish a final reply. So I think this is a very serious allegation which has been made.
Yes.
And let me add another thing. When the Foreign Minister was speaking to the press, she said that we are searching for the truth. But while searching for the truth, before only the diplomats had been expelled, that means you had come to a conclusion. So I think this is a kind of a show which is very difficult to resolve, except for the fact that you have not given evidence. We are still waiting for it.
And Terry Milsky, it just seems to indicate that Justin Trudeau has jumped the gun. No arrests, no suspects, no charge sheet, no evidence, and action has been taken. An Indian diplomat has been thrown out. This would show that whatever action is taking place in Canada, it's prejudiced. Was Justin Trudeau scared to cede ground to Jagmeet Singh and he adopted a hard line? And perhaps this move has backfired. Sir, has this embarrassed not just Justin Trudeau, but also Canada?
Well, there genuinely is a problem that Canada has to face up to. Of course, it's embarrassing. We have a situation where we have not found the shooters. Oh, never mind who paid them. I mean, we're announcing the results of the investigation when we don't have suspects, at least at that level, at the operational level. I mean, the guy, this is a contract hit we're talking about. Those 5 or 6 guys didn't decide that they had a beef with Mr. Nijjar, let's do it on our own behalf. No, they were working for somebody. And the original theory, as you recall, was that it was a gangland hit of some kind, revenge perhaps by Rapudaman Malik's camp. He was assassinated a year ago. So I won't get into that now, but my point is that, yes, Canada certainly has some weaknesses here, and that is certainly one of them, that they haven't even found the shooters. In the Malik case, for example, it took no more than about 10 days to identify the shooters. They still haven't got who paid them either. But this all has to be unraveled. This all has to be laid out in public to persuade publics in India and in Canada. This is what this is about. Either Trudeau is blowing smoke or he's not. Either he has got evidence that is going to persuade the public that India did countenance this, or alternatively, that maybe it was somebody who was acting unofficially. We've seen, for example, official statements from the Indian side today saying, I've seen one saying, well, there was absolutely no truth at all that any Indian intelligence agency was involved. Okay, well, what about all of the other agencies? It doesn't exclude the others. It just says intelligence agencies. And then what about the statement of Mr. Jaishankar that this is not India's policy? Well, lots of things happen that aren't India's policy. Presumably, India might say, if we find that there is something to this, India might very well say, well, but it was against our policy. It was unofficial. We didn't know this guy. He wasn't acting for us. Never liked him anyway. Whatever.
Fair enough, but all of that,
you can see we could go that way.
in all of that, the onus is on Justin Trudeau. The onus,
Agreed.
Yashovardhan Azad,
Agreed.
is entirely on Canada. So they've taken action. They've sent back our diplomat. And unfortunately, they've taken no action against people like Gurpatwant Singh Pannu or others who are spreading terror in Canada, intimidating Hindus in Canada. Is all of this a smoke screen? Is Justin Trudeau perhaps, and Terry, I'll come to you, sir, to respond to that also. Is inflation the problem in his country? Is housing the problem in his country? And is all of this just diversionary tactics? Mr. Azad, you go first, and then Mr. Milsky.
Gaurav, just now, Mr. Milewski mentioned a very important case also, that is the murder of Riputaman Malik.
Yes.
And soon after Niger, there was another murder of the Shardul.
Shardul Singh,
So
that's right.
these two cases, as we are talking about, these are also results of inter-gang rivalry. So how is the case of Niger any different? And I'm talking as a professional policeman. When you're talking about a particular murder investigation, then you have to give the threads of investigation, and you also have to give the present report of that investigation as to what you have arrived by way of evidence, whether it's a kind of a statement which is there from somewhere. Now, what has been derived so far is a kind of a metadata. There's a huge amount of intelligence, Gaurav, which is collected by the Americans or the English, from CGHQ and it's a huge amount of metadata, who's talking to whom and who's talking to whom. Now, do you ferret out actual, evidence in a particular murder case? If you're not, then you're discussing this at a purely political level, which should have been discussed sans noise, sans public platforms, and discussed between two governments. So this is a very important thing which was missed by the Canadian government. And the last point I just want to mention is there is a mountain of evidence against Niger or other people.
Yes.
The impression which the Khalistanis are given in Canada is that a lot of things are happening in Punjab. Nothing is happening in Punjab at all. In fact, let me tell you, there is not an iota of impact of Khalistani activities in Punjab, except for the fact that the machinations which have been engineered from Canada are leading to murders like, Sidhu Moosewala and things like that. And that is why the act today by the government of India of seizing the assets of these Khalistani is a very good step, because this will add to the dossier and at least convince the governments the criminal activities which are happening here in the name of Khalistan.
But, journalists and authorities like Terry Milsky, they've been trying to tell Canada of what the Khalistanis have been up to, right from the bombing of Kanishk. And unfortunately, governments in Canada have chosen to turn a blind eye. Mr. Milsky, why would you think Justin Trudeau did what he did if there was no evidence?
Well, firstly, I don't think he would have done what he did if there was no evidence. I can't believe that. It would be absolute madness. It would be suicidal as a political matter. If he has no evidence, and we're pretty soon going to find out whether or not he does, then he's finished in politics, and his prime ministership will be history. But as for the question, which I think is a good one, about what about, we've got lots of evidence on Panoon and these other characters that should be in the conversation here. Absolutely. I mean, that is at the heart of the conversation, in my view, that Canada for 40 years absolutely has been tolerating, has been permissive, has been looking the other way and refusing to use their freedom of speech to denounce these activities, by which I mean not just free speech, having a nice vote in a referendum. but I mean beyond free speech into the realm of the incitement of violence and the glorification of terrorism, which has been outlawed in most other sensible countries, but not in Canada. We don't have what the British, for example, have a prohibition making the glorification of terrorism a criminal offense. In Canada, by contrast, you can put a great big glamour photo of the Kanishka bomber on the side of the Gurdwara with ceremonial sword and ornate turban. It's a glamour shot. It's a martyr poster honoring and revering the worst mass murder in Canadian history. Well, this has got to be the subject of law. Canada has to move on all of that. And that would indicate to the Indians, I believe, that we're looking for a better relationship and that we're prepared to recognize Indian concerns. And at the same time, the Indians need to recognize that on this side of that line of inciting violence, where it is merely freedom of speech, that the sophisticated approach on the Indian side would not be to bang the table and say, lock them up, for freedom, for freely expressing their political wishes. That's not going to happen. No Western democracy, I'm sorry to tell you, is going to abolish freedom of speech to please the Indians because it would be convenient.
But so isn't that an unfair criticism? Nobody's saying abolish freedom of speech, but threatening Hindus in Canada, saying leave this country, or Kanishka bombing, Mr. Azad, that clearly cannot be seen as freedom of expression. So it's my expression, as these Khalistanis would say, I bombed 330 people off the skies, and Canada says freedom of expression.
Gaurav, let me tell you, I would like to bring your attention to the strike of the truckers in Canada, where a very tough action was taken by Trudeau. And so when it's a question of something happening in Canada, something a little disruptive, then a very firm action is taken.
Yes.
But when you have secessionist activities going on against a particular country, then I think a friendly country, a democratic country needs to react. And the other thing which I want to point out, in the Khalistani demonstration which took place outside the consulates and the embassy, the Indian flag was stomped on the streets and played like a football. I mean, I think any nation's flag is sacrosanct, and it'll arouse very, very adverse sentiments in anywhere in the world. So I think in that respect, I think Canada has been, it doesn't have a case at all. And
Canada better come up and start living in the 21st century and seriously understand that one man's terrorist cannot be another man's freedom fighter, and that terror be intellectual cover fire be given to it in the form of freedom of expression. But this is one debate that we shall continue to have perhaps over next several days and weeks till Canada sees light. But as always, Mr. Terry Milvsky and Yashovardhan Azad for joining me here on India First. Many thanks. Coming up next is Business Today. Stay with us.
You are watching India Today.